couple of days ago, Korg Singapore sent me a text and said that they have a demo review unit of the latest Korg SV-2 digital stage piano available, and asked if I were interested to review it for you guys on my channel. And I said, hey, why not? And I'm gonna go pick it up right now. Let's go. 10 years ago, when Korg launched the SV-1 stage piano, I was just in love with how it looks with that vacuum tube, that very retro vintage kind of construction. And of course, it has many fans, but it did have a lot of shortcomings when this was launched 10 years ago. Hopefully now with the SV-2, it is a big improvement, and Korg has taken the feedback of the SV-1 owners, and I will be going through the paces on this SV-2 over the next couple of weeks, and I will be telling you what I think about this stage piano.
2 weeks later.
If you're new here, welcome. My name is Jeremy C, and in my channel I have made more than 300 independent and unbiased reviews, as well as tips and tutorials on arrangers and keyboards, as well as digital pianos. If content like this interests you, make sure you subscribe and smash that notification bell icon. Launched more than 10 years ago, the Korg SV-1 with the vintage look and a quirky design language had a lot of fans because this Korg SV-1 just had a lot of stage presence, and the Rhodes, Wurlitzers and clavs sounded really good. The vacuum tube on the SV-1 is one of the features which makes this vintage looking stage piano stand out, and that has been retained on the SV-2, although the orange color light comes from a little LED kind of light there. But the tube is definitely working because it does get warm to the touch, so you know that it isn't just a gimmick. The vintage look of the SV-1 and SV-2 right here has a polarizing effect. You either hate it or you love it, and this look right now almost certainly always draw comparison with the Kruma 7, and the SV-2 is priced slightly more affordable than the Kruma 7, and the distribution and support of a Kruma product is definitely not as good as the one by Korg, especially where I'm staying. Also, the rainbow colored lights on the Kruma 7 may turn off many buyers. This is about 21 kilos or about 45 pounds depending on which side of the pond you are living at, and it is definitely one of a pretty heavy stage piano out there. That is to be expected because you get a really good kind of weighted keys, which is really good for playing electric pianos as well as acoustic pianos. The earlier SV1 has had reports of the entire piano freezing up when loads of effects were applied, and that is something which is unacceptable in a stage instrument, and that is the reason why stage instruments are preferred over using virtual instruments VSTs. And so far in my time of playing with the SV2 extensively, really maxing out all the effects and trying to get this to freeze up, it has not happened to me yet. The keybed on the SV2 remains the same as the one on SV1, which is the Korg RH3 keybed, and this is the same keybed that is used on Korg's flagship Kronos 88 as well as the G1 Air cabinet digital pianos, and in my opinion it is one of the better keybeds out there, and I definitely do enjoy playing on this keybed very much. The SV2 now comes in 4 different variations. You get the 88 key version as well as the 73 keys version, and you also have the option of the version with speakers in it, and that is the SV2S. The speakers are specially designed by the Italian speaker company KEYBED. I didn't get access to the units with speakers, so I cannot comment on it personally. While the SV1 was very popular with stage musicians and small studios, the lack of a built-in speakers meant that it wasn't very popular with the consumer market and the home piano player market. And the design of the SV2 is so unique that it will be a great addition to any living room, and now that it comes with built-in speakers, I'm sure it will be able to capture a large part of that market as well. In the next 3 parts of this video, I will talk about the shortcomings of the SV1 that is now addressed in the SV2. And then the other thing I will be talking about is 12 things that I love about the SV2, as well as 10 ways I think it could be better for my kind of playing scenarios. Here are the shortcomings of the SV1 that has been addressed on the SV2. So the SV1 had 36 sounds, which many musicians find limiting. However, that is now resolved because the SV2 now has twice as many sounds. You get 72 voices on the SV2, and this takes up 10 times more sample data for a more detailed and expressive sound. And the minute I played on it, I can definitely hear a massive difference in the sound between the SV1 and the SV2, especially for the acoustic piano sounds. So one of the complaints about the SV1 is that the acoustic piano sounds were just having a very short sustain to it, and it just decays really quickly, and it wasn't really very useful for ballad kind of playing, and this has definitely been resolved with the SV2. The sound engine in the SV2 is also improved, and it is now using the EDS-X sound engine versus just the usual EDS engine on the SV1. You can also find the very good German, Italian, Austrian, as well as Japanese grand piano samples from Korg's renowned sample library in the SV2 right now. So these are a lot of the samples that is found on Korg's higher end cabinet style digital home piano as well. The legacy piano voices are still there if you are an SV1 owner and it's just feeling nostalgic and you just want to use your SV1 voices in your SV2. It is still there if you want to use it. The other shortcoming of SV1, which many musicians do complain about, is that there is a lack of split and layering options. You could either only split or layer the sounds because you could only use up to a maximum of 2 voices on the SV1, and you are very much stuck with the factory presets as well. One of the problem with the SV1, many people may not believe it, but the split point on the SV1 is fixed and couldn't be moved at all. So this is now fixed in the SV2. You can split it at any point, and now the SV2 enables you to use up to 3 layers, and that is definitely a welcome move for a much richer and thicker sound. The SV1 also had only 80 notes of polyphony, which some players do complain about drop notes when they were using long delays and reverb, and complex passages. If you are a classical musician using the acoustic piano voices, that could be a problem. It has now been upgraded to 128 note polyphony on the SV2. The SV1 could save 8 user registration presets, and Korg on the SV series call it the favorites. And this was quite limiting if you have quite a number of gig sets to go through. And the SV2 now resolves that. You get 800% more favorites presets, and you can save up to 64 slots of your registration settings. When I was using my SV1, I would very often accidentally press some of the buttons, or sometimes you have a curious bar patron who was just poking around your instrument. They might just inadvertently press some buttons that you don't want to be pressed. So there is now a panel lock feature on the SV2, and that is one of the things I really like. Here are some of the things I like about the SV2. The first thing is the KEYBED, and that's the RH3. Even though it's 10 years old, it is definitely one of the more capable ones out there. I also like that there are 8 velocity curves to personalize it and to dial in the touch sensitivity of this instrument on a very micro level. And thankfully, Korg has kept most of the tactile buttons and knobs and switches on the SV2, and it really allows the musician, the piano player, to modify the sound in real time to get the kind of sound that you want in order to cut through the mix, especially if you are playing with a band. And this tactile buttons and knobs is definitely a big selling point versus more consumer-centric stage pianos like the Casio PXS 3000 or the Yamaha P515 or even the Korg D1 itself. With all these tactile knobs, buttons, as well as switches, you don't need to dive into a deep menu or go through a convoluted key press sequence in order to get the results you want. The other thing that I like about the Korg SV2 is that it has very usable bread and butter sounds, and the sounds is definitely warmed up from the tube valve. It definitely has a lot more soul and is less clinical than the other stage pianos that I've played on. One of the things that add a great deal of dimension to the Korg SV2 is that there is now a lot of sympathetic resonance, string resonance, as well as Korg's RX noises such as key off samples and pedal sounds, and this really adds a lot to the realism of these sounds. Even though Korg has retained 8 buttons for the favorites presets, but now you can access it using additional banks attached to each button for 64 of the favorites for easy call up during gigs, and I definitely like that very much. It is one of the features I have been using. I tweak the sounds I like and I save it into a preset, and now I have a lot more space to save that. I also love the panel lock on the Korg SV2, which was something that wasn't found on the SV1, and that made sure that I wouldn't accidentally change anything while in the middle of a set. One of the big selling points of the SV2 is that all the effects processors, the preamps, storm boxes, what we call the guitar pedal effects, the amp modeling, as well as the EQ settings can all really be adjusted on the fly, which is a very welcome move, especially if you have been used to using stage pianos or other instruments that needs you to dive deep into the LCD screen and to get multi-menus as well as functions to get what you need. The Reverb effects processor on the SV2 also sounds very good. It is apparently from the flagship Kronos, and to my ears, it definitely has a much nicer, warmer and cleaner sound to it as well. I think it is a no-brainer to get the speaker version of the Korg SV2. That is because the additional speakers adds less than 5% of the weight to the instrument. It adds less than 1 kilo to the non-speaker version, and it's a lot more convenient if you need to practice at home and you don't have to plug in monitor speakers, and if you're trying to scratch out ideas in small group practice. Or you can also use the speakers as a pair of monitor speakers on stage. The SV-2 is one of the stage pianos that has a pair of balanced XLR outputs, and that is a great thing for me because I don't have to deal with DI boxes, and it is critical for me if I've got like long cable runs. The sound is much cleaner and it also gives a much hotter signal, and that is something which not all stage pianos have, although technically they should because they are stage pianos. And I also like the fact that the SV-2 has retained the headphones jack that faces the player instead of locating it behind the instrument, just like many other pianos out there. And in a world where 5-DIN MIDI in and output ports are just being replaced by USB MIDI, I'm glad that this has been retained on the SV-2. The Korg SV-2 editor is really powerful, and it's a very visual way for you to create your own presets, your own splits, layers, applying effects to the voices, and you can see it on a much bigger screen on your laptop. The Korg SV-1, even though it had a lot of shortcomings, really retains value really well, and where I live, used ones are very rare. In fact, I haven't seen one used being listed where I live, and I think that will be the same for the SV-2. This piano has soul. When you play it, it just has a certain quality to the sound that you don't get in the other stage pianos out there. However, not everything is a bed of roses when it comes to the SV-2. There are a couple of things which just didn't work very well. For me, it could be different for you depending on your kind of gig setup. So I found that the orchestral voices like the pizzicato strings, the glockenspiel, they are not the most useful on a stage piano. I don't foresee using them very much in a live scenario, and of course, you know, other than using it for playing like your Simpsons theme, I think the usage of it is pretty limited. The organ voices on the Korg SV-2 are also not the most useful because there is a lack of drawbars. The whole point about playing the organ voices is that you have drawbars to kind of quickly modify the sound to what you want. It's nice that the organs are there, but I would have preferred that the sample memory be used for more EPs, clavs, as well as acoustic pianos, because that is what the strength of the SV-2 is about. For organ players, they recently released Yamaha YC61 with its waterfall keys, as well as the live tactile drawbars would be a much better choice for those who prefer to play with the organ sounds. Weighted keys are also not the best for playing organs as well as orchestral voices because they are just not the most expressive for that kind of style of playing. Another thing that I don't like about the SV-2 is that it still continues to have no way to make your own layers of split with just the keyboard itself. If you are in a band practice sessions and you are just brainstorming ideas and you just want to create different layers of splits based on what you are practicing during that session, you're not able to do so unless you have your laptop or your computer with you. And for me, one of the shortcomings of the SV-2 editor is that it only works on the Mac and Windows. I can understand 10 years ago where tablets, iOS devices, Android devices are not so common, but in this day and age, in 2020, I believe that Korg should release a iPad or Android tablet version of the SV-2 editor. If you intend to use this keyboard in a studio, the lack of a pitch as well as modulation wheel can be a deal breaker. There's no way to do any kind of that with the wheels because there just isn't any. One of the deal breakers for some people is that you are not able to use both the reverb effect as well as the delay simultaneously. So if you intend to create very spacious, very ambient, new agey kind of music with lots of delay and lots of reverb, that is something which may be a deal breaker for many of you. The EQ knobs on the SV-2 are also used to control the amount of levels of the 3 different layers in your layers and splits. However, it just needs an extra step because you need to hold on to the EQ knob before it turns into kind of a mixing knob for you to mix the levels of each of the layers. And in a live scenario, that can be just way too many steps. It would have been better if it's just a single press of the EQ knob and then we can start, moving about the levels of each of the layers. Also in 2020, I had wished that there is a USB audio in and out, and so that we don't need an audio interface to attach this to a DAW. I wish that the top of this piano is a little bit more flat so that I could lay an additional synth or a laptop or a tablet on top of this. However, this is not the case. It still retains the exact same curved surface of the SV-1. It's nice to look at, but not the most functional. When you pay $2,000 for a stage piano, I don't think you expect that the bottom panel of the SV-1 is actually a particle board. And on the SV-1, it was a particle board, and the SV-2, it still remains the same. It is still a particle board. I hope you found my very detailed review of the SV-2 to be helpful for you to decide if this will be the piano that will suit what you need. Till the next time, I'll see you in the next video.